Hello and welcome. Tonight, we will gently journey through the vast history of life on Earth, from its humble beginnings as tiny single cells to the appearance of modern humans. This will be a calm and soothing exploration of Earth's deep past. As you listen, let your mind drift peacefully. We will move slowly through billions of years, pausing often, with soft repetition of the major steps along the way. There's no need to remember any dates or technical terms. Just relax and enjoy the story as it unfolds in a simple, peaceful way. Take a deep breath, settle in comfortably, and allow yourself to float back in time. We begin at the very beginning, a young Earth and the origin of life itself. Imagine the scene as best you can, or simply listen to the descriptions. Let the story carry you as we travel from primordial seas to the age of dinosaurs and onward to the first humans, all in a calm and gentle narrative designed to help you drift towards sleep. Our journey through time will be long, nearly 4 billion years of life's history. We will pass through Earth's great eras, the Precambrian, the Paleozoic, the Mesozoic, and the Cenozoic. In each era, we'll see how life changed and grew more complex, overcoming great challenges and even massive extinctions. We'll witness life venturing from the oceans onto land and eventually into the trees and savannas where our ancestors appeared. All of this will unfold gradually, with soft restatements and long pauses between concepts, allowing you to absorb the story in a relaxed way. Now let's begin at the dawn of Earth's history, a time of fire, water, and the very first spark of life. Feel free to close your eyes if you like, and envision the ancient Earth as we start our tranquil voyage through the evolution of life on Earth, from single cells to humans. We travel back more than 4.5 billion years to when Earth was new. The young planet was a hot, glowing ball of molten rock. Over time, Earth cooled and a crust formed. Rain fell for ages upon the hot surface, forming the first oceans. In this Precambrian time, the sky was different. There was no breathable oxygen yet, and no ozone layer. The air was thick with gases like methane and carbon dioxide. Lightning flashed in dark clouds, and volcanoes hissed and rumbled. The seas were warm, and under their surface a miracle was about to happen. In those ancient oceans, sometime around 3.7 billion years ago, the first life appeared. Try to imagine it. Tiny, simple cells drifting in the water, so small you would need a microscope to see them. These were microbes, primitive bacteria-like organisms. They had no complex parts, just little bubbles of life carrying out simple chemical reactions. We don't know exactly how they formed, but in the warm oceans and beneath the intense sun, somehow chemistry became biology. These first cells fed on the chemicals around them. They were alive. They could grow and make copies of themselves, and thus the great story of life on Earth began. For a long, long time, not much seemed to change. Life remained very simple and very small. Countless microscopic organisms floated in the oceans and pond-like shallows. They absorbed nutrients and energy from their environment quietly. Imagine an endless ocean under a dim young sun, filled with invisible tiny beings carrying on their patient existence. Millions of years, then billions of years, drifted by in this way. Life persisted in its simplest form, adapting slowly to the changing planet, but still just single cells for over 1 billion years. Then, gradually, some of those tiny life forms learned a new trick, one that would change the world. Certain early microbes developed the ability to photosynthesize, to use sunlight to make food and release oxygen. Around 2 to 3 billion years ago, blue-green bacteria called cyanobacteria began harnessing sunlight in this way. Floating mats of cyanobacteria spread in sunlit shallow waters, exhaling oxygen as a waste product. At first, this oxygen reacted with rocks and dissolved iron in the oceans, but slowly the free oxygen began to accumulate in the water and then in the atmosphere. This was a gentle revolution. The sky, once orange and hazy, eventually turned a clearer blue as oxygen built up. For those early microbes that could not tolerate oxygen, it was a catastrophe. Oxygen was toxic to them. But other life adapted and even thrived in the new oxygen-rich world. After oxygen filled the seas and air, the Earth became more recognizable. An ozone layer formed high in the atmosphere, filtering the harsh ultraviolet sunlight. With this protective layer, the planet's surface grew more hospitable. Life continued quietly in the oceans. Tiny cells diversified. Some learned to cooperate, Some even began living inside others, forming more complex single cells with specialized parts. These would become the first eukaryotic cells, the kind all plants and animals are made of. In time, cells also started to join together in colonies, a first step toward multicellular life. Imagine now the late Precambrian ocean around 1 billion years ago. In the calm water, you might find slimy green seaweeds, simple multicellular organisms attached to rocks. These are among the earliest multicelled forms of life, consisting of many cells stuck together, doing different jobs. It took immense spans of time for this innovation to occur, but once cells worked together, new possibilities opened. By around 600 million years ago, in the twilight of the Precambrian era, the oceans hosted soft-bodied animals unlike anything today. Strange leaf or disc-shaped creatures lying on the seafloor or slowly crawling about. These are known from fossils as the Ediacaran fauna. They had no hard shells or bones, just jelly-like bodies. We might picture them as gentle, ghostly shapes drifting in shallow marine waters. The Precambrian was an incredibly long chapter of Earth's history. It spans roughly 88% of the planet's existence. For nearly 4 billion years, life remained in the seas, mostly microscopic and simple. But as the Precambrian drew to a close, life was poised to blossom into new forms. The air now held oxygen. The protective ozone layer allowed life to exist in sunlit shallows and soon on land. And within the seas, some animals had evolved basic muscles, eyes, and other features that would enable active movement and sensing. The stage was set for an explosion of diversity. As the Precambrian ended, about 541 million years ago, Earth experienced one of its first great mass extinction events. Many of those soft, ancient organisms disappeared, perhaps due to changes in climate or ocean chemistry. But from that change came opportunity. The door was open for new life forms with hard shells and complex bodies to emerge. Life's long childhood was over. Now we drift into the next era, the Paleozoic, where life would rapidly diversify and step onto the land. Pause here, taking a slow breath. We have traveled through the Precambrian, witnessing the birth of life and its slow, patient early years. From single cells to simple multicellular creatures, life endured. Now, as we continue, life's pace quickens in the coming eras. We now enter the Paleozoic era, which began about 538 million years ago. The world is still mostly ocean, but everything is about to change. In a relatively short span of geological time, an evolutionary flowering occurs. Scientists call it the Cambrian explosion. It's as if nature suddenly decided to experiment with all sorts of new body plans and life strategies. The oceans teemed with new creatures. Many animals evolved hard shells or exoskeletons for protection. With these hard parts, they left plentiful fossils, allowing us to know of their existence. Imagine yourself drifting under the Cambrian Sea. The water is clear and sunlit. On the seafloor, you see strange trilobites, oval creatures with armored shells and many legs, scuttling around in the mud. They look like giant pillbugs or horseshoe crabs and were among the most common animals then. Other odd creatures swim by, some with long spines, some with feathery arms for filtering food from the water. It is a vibrant marine community. Most major groups of animals made their first appearance during the Cambrian period. There are primitive worms burrowing, sponges anchored on the seabed, and jellyfish-like forms pulsating in the water. One might even glimpse fearsome new predators such as Anomalocaris, a large shrimp-like hunter with grasping mouthparts. A far cry from the tiny microbes of eons past. Life in the Cambrian and the following Ordovician period flourished in the seas. Over millions of years, fish evolved, first jawless eel-like fish and later fish with jaws and teeth. The oceans truly became alive with diversity. Reefs built from early coral-like animals emerged, providing habitats for many species. Trilobites crawled, squid-like cephalopods darted, and armored fish cruised in ancient waters. Above the waves, however, the land was still mostly barren rock. But not for much longer. Life was preparing its next great venture, the colonization of land. The first to brave the empty continents were plants. Tiny green plants and fungi began growing at the water's edge. Mossy mats likely clung to moist shoreline rocks. By the middle of the Ordovician period, roughly 460 million years ago, the earliest land plants had appeared. They were very simple, Think of small mosses and liverworts, only a few centimeters tall, hugging the damp ground. These pioneer plants had no true roots or leaves yet, but they performed a crucial task. They turned bare rock and soil into livable habitat. They also started pumping out even more oxygen into the atmosphere. If you were to stand on land at that time, you might see green scum on wet surfaces and patches of tiny spongy plants in marshy areas. It wasn't much, but it was the beginning of forests to come. With plants greening the land and providing food and shelter, soon the first animals followed. The initial land animals were likely arthropods, creatures with jointed legs and exoskeletons, related to insects and spiders. In the Silurian period, which followed the Ordovician, the fossil record gives us a 425 million-year-old millipede-like creature from Scotland, the oldest known land animal. Picture this little pioneer, a many-legged bug crawling through the damp moss, perhaps eating decaying plant material. There may also have been ancient spider-like creatures and primitive insects venturing onto shore around this time. They were tiny, but their footsteps marked a momentous step in life's journey. Finally, life was moving beyond the sea. Meanwhile, back in the water, fish continued to diversify. By the Devonian period, around 409 to 359 million years ago, often called the Age of Fishes, oceans and rivers swarmed with fish of all shapes and sizes. Some had jaws and sharp fins and grew quite large. In the late Devonian, lobe-finned fish developed strong, fleshy fins that allowed them to push along shallow water or mudflats. It's from these lobe-finned fish that the first amphibians eventually evolved. Try to imagine a Devonian swamp, dense plant growth in the water. By now, there were the first trees, like tall ferns and early woody plants, forming the planet's first forests. Insects buzz around. Winged insects like ancient dragonflies appear in late Devonian and Carboniferous times. Crawling in the mud near the water's edge is a creature that looks part fish, part salamander, something like Tiktaalik or Ichthyostega, early amphibious animals. They have limbs that resemble stout fins, and they can prop themselves up and even crawl for short stretches on land, though they still must stay near water to survive. These were the first vertebrates on land, around 360 to 370 million years ago. They breathed with primitive lungs and could venture onto the shore, heralding the age of amphibians. Life's expansion onto the continents accelerated in the Carboniferous period, about 359 to 299 million years ago. The world then was warm and humid. Vast swampy forests covered much of the land, especially in equatorial regions. The plants of that time were giant ferns, club mosses, and horsetail reeds, some as tall as trees. In these dense forests, oxygen levels were very high. Dragonflies the size of seagulls flitted through ancient skies, and giant insects and spiders thrived. Amphibians of many kinds swam in the waterways and lurked in the lush undergrowth. It was in these Carboniferous swamps that the first reptiles evolved. Some amphibians gradually adapted to life farther from water, developing amniotic eggs that could be laid on land without drying out, a key evolutionary step. By around 320 million years ago, small lizard-like reptiles scurried across the leaf litter. Unlike amphibians, these reptiles didn't need to stay near water to reproduce. Their shelled eggs contained their own little pond of fluid. Reptiles quickly spread and diversified. By 300 million years ago, reptiles were thriving, both on land and in water. We can imagine them in the great coal forests. There were some slender, agile reptiles snapping up insects and larger ones eating plants. Some early reptiles gave rise to the ancestors of mammals, called synapsids or mammal-like reptiles, and others would lead to the dinosaurs and birds. These were sauropsids, more like traditional reptiles. One famous early predator of the Permian period, just after the Carboniferous, was Dimetrodon, often recognized by the large sail on its back. Dimetrodon isn't a dinosaur, but a reptile-like synapsid. It lived around 280 million years ago and was one of the top land predators of its time. In the story of life, creatures like Dimetrodon represent some of the first large land carnivores, patrolling swampy forests in search of prey. Throughout the late Carboniferous and the following Permian period, 299 to 252 million years ago, the continents had joined into a supercontinent called Pangaea. This brought drier conditions in some interior regions. Fern forests gave way to early conifer trees in places, and the diversity of life shifted. The Permian saw the rise of new reptiles, and synapsids adapted to these changes. Some had mammal-like features such as differentiated teeth and possibly whiskers or fur. Life at the end of the Paleozoic era was rich and varied. In the seas, there were reefs built by sponges and algae, along with fish, ammonites, spiral-shelled mollusks, and marine reptiles. On land, dense forests of ferns and conifers grew, inhabited by insects, amphibians, and many reptiles of assorted shapes, some hulking and heavy, others small and quick. But then came a dark chapter. The end of the Paleozoic was marked by the greatest mass extinction Earth has ever experienced. About 252 million years ago, at the boundary between the Permian and the next era, a catastrophe struck. It's nicknamed the Great Dying. Massive volcanic eruptions in Siberia are thought to have poisoned the atmosphere and oceans. The climate swung unpredictably. In a geologic heartbeat, perhaps over just tens of thousands of years, almost all life perished. More than 90% of marine species went extinct, and about 75% of species on land disappeared. Imagine the seas becoming nearly empty, coral reefs decaying, and the forests withering to bare earth. The world grew still and quiet, with only sparse pockets of life remaining. Trilobites, which had thrived for 270 million years, vanished in this event. It was a profound reset for life on Earth. Yet life finds a way. Though severely diminished, life did survive the Great Dying. A few hardy species of fish, reptiles, insects, and plants hung on. From those survivors, life began to recover and diversify once more. It took millions of years for ecosystems to rebuild, but gradually, green returned to the land and new animals filled the seas. The end Permian extinction, as devastating as it was, cleared the stage for the next great act in life's history, the Mesozoic era, often called the Age of Reptiles. Among the survivors and new evolutions of the Triassic period would be a group of creatures that would dominate Earth for the next 160 million years, the dinosaurs. Let's pause and breathe. We have covered an enormous span of time in the Paleozoic, life's explosion in the Cambrian seas, the greening of the land, the rise of fish, amphibians, and reptiles, and the greatest extinction that almost ended everything. Through it all, life persisted and adapted. Now, as we continue, we enter the Mesozoic, where life will astonish us with dinosaurs and the first birds and mammals. Continue to relax as the story unfolds softly. The Mesozoic era began about 252 million years ago, in the wake of the Permian extinction. This era spans three major periods, the Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous, and lasts until about 66 million years ago. If the Paleozoic was the age of ancient life in the seas and swamps, the Mesozoic is often remembered as the age of dinosaurs. But it didn't start with giants. In the early Triassic, life's recovery was slow and humble. Much of Earth was empty and barren after the mass extinction. Over time, ecosystems re-established. Conifer trees and ginkgo-like plants spread in the forests. In the seas, new coral reefs were built by different organisms, and surviving fish and ammonites diversified. A group of animals called archosaurs, the ancestors of crocodiles, dinosaurs, and birds, began to rise in the Triassic. Early in the Triassic, reptiles called therapsids, the last of the mammal-like reptiles, and some amphibians were among the dominant land animals. But as climate stabilized and plants flourished again, dinosaurs evolved from small archosaurian reptiles around the middle of the Triassic period. The first dinosaurs were not the enormous creatures we often think of. They were relatively small, bipedal animals, perhaps 1 to 2 meters long, built for agility. Around 230 million years ago, during the late Triassic, these early dinosaurs were just one of many groups of reptiles on land. They lived alongside crocodile-like creatures and early mammals that had also recently evolved. Yes, the first mammals appeared in the late Triassic, roughly 200 to 220 million years ago. They were tiny, mostly shrew-sized, nocturnal insect eaters hiding in undergrowth or burrows. These first mammals likely had fur and warm blood, distinguishing them from their reptilian neighbors. They lived in the shadows of dinosaurs and other larger reptiles, avoiding notice. Through the entire Mesozoic era, mammals remained small, generally under the size of a house cat, never overtaking the dominant reptiles. Still, they quietly diversified into different forms, some climbing trees, some gliding, some burrowing, preparing for a distant future when they would flourish. Back to the dinosaurs. In the late Triassic, a significant event occurred around 201 million years ago. Another mass extinction, the Triassic-Jurassic extinction. Likely caused by massive volcanic activity, as the supercontinent Pangaea began to rift apart, this event wiped out up to 80% of species on land and in the oceans. Many of the Triassic reptiles perished, especially large amphibians and crocodile-like creatures that had dominated the time. But some lineages survived, including those early dinosaurs. And with many competitors gone, dinosaurs seized the opportunity. We move into the Jurassic period now, approximately 200 to 145 million years ago. The world in the Jurassic was warm and lush. Pangaea was splitting into separate continents, creating diverse environments. Life blossomed in this stability. Dinosaurs grew larger and more varied, quickly becoming the dominant land animals. Visualize a Jurassic scene. A wide river valley bordered by ferns and tall conifer trees under a golden sun. Along the riverbank, a herd of Brachiosaurus, enormous long-necked dinosaurs, moves slowly as they munch on the high branches of trees. In the distance, a Stegosaurus with its plated back grazes on low bushes. The air vibrates with the calls of creatures, perhaps the hoots or bellows of these prehistoric giants. This was truly the age of reptiles. During the Jurassic, birds also made their debut. One lineage of small, feathered theropod dinosaurs, theropods are the two-legged carnivorous dinosaurs, evolved feathers not just for warmth or display, but for gliding and flight. By around 150 million years ago, the famous Archaeopteryx glided through Jurassic skies. It had wings with flight feathers and a blend of reptilian and avian features, teeth and a long bony tail, but also feathers and a wishbone. It was not a strong flyer like modern birds, but it marks a transition. Archaic birds were taking to the air. Imagine the quiet of a Jurassic dawn. Mist clings to a prehistoric forest. Suddenly, something flutters from one branch to another. Not quite a bird as we know it, but a feathered dinosaur testing the air. These early birds would over time give rise to the vast array of bird species we see today. In the oceans of the Jurassic, marine reptiles like plesiosaurs, long-necked sea reptiles with flippers, and ichthyosaurs, which looked similar to dolphins with fish-like tails, reigned. Giant fish and squid-like ammonites thrived. The seas were as much a dinosaurian world in spirit as the land. Though true dinosaurs were only land creatures, their reptilian cousins ruled the waves and even the skies, with pterosaurs, the flying reptiles like Pterodactylus, soaring overhead. Moving forward, the Cretaceous period, 145 to 66 million years ago, saw further evolution and peaks in diversity. By now, the continents were further apart. North America was separated from Europe, South America from Africa, and an ocean ran through the middle of the world. This allowed different regions to develop distinct forms of life. Dinosaurs in the Cretaceous grew to their largest sizes and great variety. There were the tyrannosaurs like T-Rex, towering plant eaters like Triceratops with its great horned frill, duck-billed dinosaurs in herds, armored tank-like ankylosaurs, and swift predators like Velociraptor. Each filled a niche in complex ecosystems, some roaming vast floodplains, others stalking through forests. One could picture an endless plain under a Cretaceous sun with herds of duck-billed dinosaurs moving through cycads and ferns, while a Tyrannosaurus prowls in the distance. A subtle but incredibly important change in the Cretaceous was among the plants. Up until this time, the flora was dominated by ferns, conifers, and cycads, palm-like plants. But in the early Cretaceous, the first flowering plants, angiosperms, appeared. Initially small and not very showy, these flowering plants quickly diversified. By the late Cretaceous, flowers, fruits, and broadleaf trees had spread across the world. They co-evolved with insects, bees, butterflies, and other pollinators, which blossomed in diversity alongside the flowers. The sight of a meadow sprinkled with colorful blooms and buzzing insects first became part of Earth's landscapes in the Cretaceous. These new plants provided rich food sources, fruits, nuts, nectar, altering diets and evolution for many creatures, including early mammals and birds. Throughout the Mesozoic, the climate remained generally warm. There were no polar ice caps, forests grew near the poles. This warmth supported the giant sizes and broad distributions of the dinosaurs. However, nothing lasts forever. As the Cretaceous period neared its end, life had reached a peak of diversity and grandeur. and then came another global catastrophe, sudden and devastating. About 66 million years ago, at the boundary of the Cretaceous and the next era, a massive asteroid struck Earth. It hurtled from space and slammed into what is now the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico with unimaginable force. The impact instantly caused earthquakes, tsunamis, and sent a plume of superheated debris into the sky. Soon, wildfires raged across continents, and a thick cloud of dust and soot enveloped the planet, blocking sunlight. For months or even years, darkness and cold prevailed. This event is known as the Cretaceous-Paleogene (KPG) extinction. In the darkness, plants died without sunlight and plant-eating animals starved. The food chains collapsed. When it was over, an estimated 75% of all species on Earth had perished. On land, this extinction famously ended the reign of the dinosaurs. All the non-avian dinosaurs died out, leaving only their bird descendants. Many large marine reptiles, like plesiosaurs and mosasaurs, vanished. Ammonites, the once abundant coiled shellfish, completely died out. It was the end of the Mesozoic era and the end of the age of reptiles in its dominance. Take a moment to reflect on that grim, pivotal moment. An entire world full of vibrant life, suddenly transformed. The giant dinosaurs that had thundered across the Earth were gone. It must have been a silent and eerie world in the aftermath. Ferns and mushrooms likely were the first to recover in the gloom, covering ash-grey ground with green once more. But life did recover, and the emptiness left by the dinosaurs' departure opened opportunities for another kind of animal that had been waiting quietly in the wings, the mammals. Pause here to breathe deeply. The mighty dinosaurs have come and gone. It's a poignant reminder of the cycles of life, rise and fall. Yet life persists. Now we enter the final era, the Cenozoic, where the survivors of that extinction, particularly the mammals, will flourish and eventually lead to us, humans. Continue to relax as we gently conclude our journey through time. When the dust settled after 66 million years ago, the Cenozoic era began. Cenozoic means new life, and indeed this era would see modern life take shape. The world that emerged was transformed. With the dinosaurs, save for birds, gone, the mammals rapidly grew in diversity and size. What had once been tiny rodent-like creatures hiding from dinosaurs now evolved into an astonishing variety of forms. The Cenozoic is often called the Age of Mammals because mammals became the dominant land animals across the planet. Picture Earth in the early Paleogene period, the first part of the Cenozoic, roughly 66 to 23 million years ago. Forests regenerated and extended even into polar regions, since the climate was still very warm right after the dinosaurs. In these jungles and woodlands, mammals took on roles left vacant by the dinosaurs. There were herbivorous mammals browsing on leaves, some small and deer-like, others eventually evolving into larger forms like early horses or rhinoceros-like creatures. There were carnivorous mammals too, the ancestors of today's cats, dogs and bears, emerging as top predators on land. In South America, for a time, even giant flightless birds became apex predators in the absence of big land carnivores. Mammals, with their warm blood, fur, and nurturing of their young, proved remarkably adaptable. They spread to fill every corner of the earth, climbing in trees, burrowing underground, swimming in rivers. One notable story in this era is the return of some mammals to the oceans. By about 50 million years ago, certain hoofed land mammals began venturing into the seas to hunt for food. Over generations, their bodies became more streamlined for swimming, their back legs shrank, and their front limbs turned into flippers. Their tails became powerful tools for propulsion. These mammals evolved into the first whales. Imagine the early whales like Ambulocetus, an otter-like creature paddling in coastal waters, or later Basilosaurus, a long serpentine whale gliding through tropical seas. How peaceful it is to envision whales, mammals, ruling the oceans that were once home only to fish and reptiles. Even today, the gentle songs of whales echo a legacy that began in the Cenozoic seas. The continents during the Cenozoic were drifting into their present positions. As they moved, climates gradually changed. By the Eocene epoch, 56 to 34 million years ago, Earth was very warm, even warmer than today, with rainforests in many places. But later in the era, things cooled. Around 34 million years ago, the first permanent ice sheets formed in Antarctica as it settled over the South Pole. Deciduous forests and grasslands expanded in the cooler, drier climates. In the Miocene epoch, 23 to 5 million years ago, vast grasslands spread, especially in Africa, Asia, and the Americas. This led to an evolutionary burst of large grazing mammals, ancient horses galloping in herds, antelopes and bovines, elephant relatives, and many others, all thriving on the open plains. It was among these shifting environments that the story of our own lineage, the primates, unfolds further. Primates are the group of mammals that includes lemurs, monkeys, apes, and humans. The earliest primates actually appeared not long after the dinosaur extinction. By around 60 to 55 million years ago, there were small primate-like creatures, similar to today's lemurs or tree shrews, living in the trees. They had grasping hands and feet and keen eyesight for jumping among branches, useful adaptations in those lush Paleogene forests. As time went on, primates diversified. Monkeys emerged and spread in both the Old World, Africa, Asia, and the New World, South America. By about 25 million years ago, the lineage of apes had split from the Old World monkeys. These apes, tailless primates, included ancestors of gibbons, orangutans, gorillas, chimpanzees, and humans. In Africa, roughly 7 to 6 million years ago, an evolutionary split occurred that would prove crucial for us. Around that time, one branch of the ape family gave rise to creatures that began habitually walking on two legs, our earliest hominin ancestors. Picture a late Miocene African savanna at dawn, woodlands interspersed with grassy openings. A group of ape-like beings moves at the forest edge. They can climb trees skillfully, but when on the ground, they walk upright on two legs, perhaps to see over tall grass or to carry food. These were the first hominins after our split from the lineage that led to chimpanzees, our closest living relatives. They still had small brains, and likely didn't use tools beyond perhaps simple sticks or rocks. But their bipedal stance was a momentous adaptation. It freed their hands, and in time would enable the creation and use of complex tools. Time flowed on. By 4 million years ago, in the Pliocene epoch, hominins like Australopithecus roamed eastern and southern Africa. They were short, maybe about 1 to 1.5 meters tall, walked upright, and had a mix of human-like and ape-like traits. They likely lived in mixed habitats, some forest, some open grass, and ate a variety of foods. They might remind you of a chimpanzee that stands and walks more often, with a somewhat more human-like gait. Over millions of years, these beings gradually evolved traits that we consider more and more human. Hands capable of fine manipulation, the use of stone tools. By around 3 million years ago, simple flaked stone tools appear, and crucially, larger brains. We enter the Pleistocene epoch, about 2.6 million to 11,700 years ago, often known for its ice ages. Great sheets of ice periodically advanced from the poles during glacial periods, then retreated during warmer interglacial periods. In these changing climates, the genus Homo emerged. By roughly 5 million years ago, early Homo species like Homo habilis were using stone tools extensively, their handyman reputation earned by shaping stones to cut meat or crack bones. They had bigger brains than their Australopithecine predecessors. Following them around 1.8 million years ago, tall, human-like species such as Homo erectus appeared. Homo erectus spread far beyond Africa, into Asia and Europe, becoming the first hominin to truly wander out of our continent of origin. These early humans learned to control fire, cook food, and possibly even create simple shelter. They lived as hunter-gatherers, moving through landscapes shared with fascinating Ice Age megafauna. Imagine walking alongside herds of woolly mammoths or ancient bison, keeping watch for saber-toothed cats or giant cave bears. The world then was full of great beasts, often called megafauna, such as mammoths, giant ground sloths, huge woolly rhinos, and others, especially during the mid to late Pleistocene. Many of these animals grew very large, perhaps as an adaptation to the cooler climates or open environments of the Ice Ages. And finally, in this grand story of life, modern humans, our own species, Homo sapiens, enter the scene. The oldest fossils of Homo sapiens so far discovered are roughly 300,000 years old, found in Africa. So a few hundred millennia ago in Africa, a being physically very much like us stood under the sun. These early modern humans had high foreheads and rounded skulls housing large brains. They made more sophisticated tools than ever before, fashioned from stone, bone, and wood. They created art. By 100,000 years ago, There are signs of symbolic decoration, and by 40,000 years ago, stunning cave paintings and carvings appear around the world. They buried their dead with care, hinting at complex thoughts or beliefs. From Africa, modern humans spread to every corner of the globe. By about 60 to 50,000 years ago, they entered Asia and Australia. Around 40,000 years ago, they moved into Europe, where they encountered other human cousins like the Neanderthals. By 15 to 20,000 years ago, humans reached the Americas, completing the settlement of all continents except Antarctica. As humans spread, something remarkable happened. We adapted not just biologically, but culturally. We developed languages, traditions, and innovations passed down through learning rather than genes. We domesticated fire and later plants and animals. By around 10,000 years ago, the last ice age ended. The climate warmed into the current Holocene epoch, and humans in several parts of the world independently discovered agriculture. The cultivation of crops and taming of livestock allowed people to form settled communities, which grew into villages and eventually cities. Human population boomed, and with it came civilization, writing, technology, and all the history that we record. From one perspective, this final chapter has unfolded in a blink of an eye. Just a few thousand years out of billions. Yet for us, it feels immense and eventful. We are the product of a very long journey, one that goes all the way back to those first microbes in the primordial sea. Every creature that lived, every extinction that occurred, led in some way to us being here now. The story of life on Earth is our story too, written across deep time. Think for a moment of how resilient and creative life is. It began as a tiny spark in an ancient ocean. It survived global catastrophes, frozen snowball Earth episodes, volcanic infernos, meteor impacts. It invented ever more complex forms, cell by cell, then multicellular organisms, then the incredible variety of plants and animals. It learned to breathe oxygen, to venture onto land, to fly in the sky, and ultimately to become self-aware through the human mind. Through all the eons, life has been adventurous, continually exploring new ways of existing. Now here we are, humans, gazing back at this journey. In the grand timeline of our planet, we arrived just in the last moments. If Earth's history were a 24-hour clock, humans show up only in the final seconds before midnight. And yet, within that brief time, we have learned to understand so much of this story. As you lie here listening, you carry the legacy of all that came before, from the single-celled ancestors in the sea to the primates in the trees, and the early people learning to make fire. There is something comforting in feeling that connection. We have now traveled from the dawn of Earth to the present, a sweep of nearly 4 billion years. Let's gently recap the highlights of this remarkable journey, letting each step settle softly in our minds. In the beginning, Earth was a barren young planet. From the chemical-rich seas of the Precambrian, the first simple life emerged. Tiny cells floated in the waters of an alien world. For an unimaginably long time, life remained microscopic and simple, quietly multiplying and evolving under the water's embrace. Then, life learned a transformative trick, capturing sunlight through photosynthesis, and the world changed as oxygen filled the air. With oxygen came new possibilities. More complex cells arose, and eventually, life experimented with multicellular forms. The Precambrian ended with soft-bodied creatures living in the seas, paving the way for more complex animals to appear. With the Cambrian explosion, life blossomed into diverse forms in the oceans. The Paleozoic era saw fish swarming in ancient seas, and green plants carpeted the once empty lands. Brave pioneers, first plants, then arthropods, moved onto solid ground. Before long, amphibians were crawling out of the water, taking their first breaths of air. Forests of tall ferns and giant insects thrived in steamy swamps. Reptiles and mammal-like creatures emerged, sharing the dense Carboniferous forests. The Paleozoic was an era of creativity and expansion for life. Life faced setbacks too. The Earth witnessed its first great mass extinctions. We recall the end Ordovician Ice Age, where many marine species perished, the late Devonian, where reefs and fish suffered, and ultimately the end Permian Great Dying, when nearly all life was almost snuffed out. But each time, survivors carried the torch of life forward. These extinctions, though devastating, cleared the way for new life to flourish in their wake. The Mesozoic era rose from the ashes of the Permian extinction like a phoenix. In the Triassic, life rebounded with new vigor. Soon the age of dinosaurs arrived, those magnificent reptiles of every shape and size ruling the land, while their kin ruled the sea and air. It was a time of warm climates and lush vegetation. We saw the first birds taking wing in the Jurassic skies, and small mammals scurrying underfoot, awaiting their time. The world was vibrant and rich. Then, unexpectedly, a giant asteroid struck at the end of the Cretaceous, bringing the reign of the dinosaurs to an abrupt end. In a dark and quiet world after the impact, life persisted in the small and the hardy. Finally, in the Cenozoic era, the world became the realm of mammals and birds. In the stillness after the dinosaurs, mammals grew bold, evolving into everything from tiny shrews to towering mammoths. Great forests and then grasslands spread. Climates cooled and warmed in cycles. Primates, our ancestors, flourished in the treetops and then ventured onto the ground. In Africa, those primates stood up and walked, step by step, into a new future. The first humans learned to make tools, to paint images of their world on cave walls, to sing songs and tell stories. And in a relatively short time, humans spread across the globe, carrying curiosity and creativity everywhere. As we conclude our journey, let's take comfort in the continuity of life. Through all the drastic changes, continent shifts, climate swings, extinctions, life endures and adapts. We, as humans, are the current culmination of this grand evolutionary tale. We are made of the same stuff and follow the same rules of life as those first cells that formed in the primordial ocean. We share DNA with every living thing that has ever existed. The oxygen we breathe was first made by ancient bacteria. The cells in our bodies carry tiny organelles that were once free-living microbes billions of years ago. The calcium in our bones was forged in long-dead stars before Earth was born. We are deeply connected to the Earth and its history. Now, at the end of this long story, allow yourself to feel a sense of peace and wonder. All the trials and triumphs of life's past have led to this moment, where you are here, breathing quietly and contemplating the eons. The immense span of time we covered can make our everyday worries seem small, and that's okay. In this perspective, we find calm. Earth's ancient rhythms continue, the sun rises and sets, seasons turn, life goes on. As you prepare to rest, think of how many sunsets and sunrises life on Earth has seen. Think of the gentle perseverance of those first little cells in the sea, the slow growth of a fern in a coal forest, or the steady heartbeat of a dinosaur sleeping under Cretaceous stars. For millions upon millions of nights, life has found a way to survive until a new dawn. Tonight, you are part of that unbroken chain. Feel the continuity of time stretching behind you, supporting you. The past is done, safely recorded in fossils and stories. The future is unwritten. In this moment, all is quiet. You are lying here as life once rested in ocean sands and cave shelters under the same sky. Only the patterns of stars have changed. Allow your breathing to slow down, matching the ancient, slow pulse of Earth's time, in and out. Let any remaining thoughts float away like leaves on a primordial pond. You have traveled so far in your mind, and now you have reached today, the slender edge between all that's come before and all that's yet to be. We have journeyed from single cells to humans, across countless ages, in a gentle voyage of the imagination. Now it's time to let go of the narrative and drift into sleep, carrying with you the comfort that you are part of something vast and enduring. The Earth will continue to turn, and life will continue its story, one day at a time. Rest now, feeling connected, calm, and at peace. Thank you for coming on this journey through time with me. Sleep well, dear listener, and remember that in the grand history of life, you too are a beautiful and essential part. Good night.